the mystery of a single moment. There's a saying that goes, sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. But how often do we actually take that step? How often do we pause, look around, and realize that one small act of integrity, one honest decision, could ripple out and change the course of not just our life, but someone else's? Welcome to the journey. Today, you're not just watching a video, you're stepping into 5 real, raw, and unforgettable stories. Moral lessons that tore lives apart, mended broken hearts, and lit the way through some of the darkest corners of humanity. These are stories you may never have heard before. Some happened decades ago, some just last year. All of them undeniably true, verified, witnessed. And if you listen closely, they might just change something in you forever. Let's begin with a man named Elias, a taxi driver in Athens. He wasn't famous, he didn't own a mansion, but one early morning something happened that would shake the world quietly. It was 4:17 a.m. A young woman stumbled into his cab, bruised, scared. Holding back tears, she begged him not to speak. Elias could have asked questions, could have demanded money up front. Instead, he just drove, silently, for 35 minutes until she whispered, "This is it." Before she stepped out, she turned and said, "You saved my life. He would have killed me." She handed him a crumpled note. Inside it, an address, and 2 words, "Call police." Elias did more than that. He risked everything. He testified, he faced threats. But because of him, a human trafficking ring was exposed. One decision, one quiet hero, one act of moral courage that changed dozens of lives. You see, morality isn't always about standing on stages or shouting from rooftops. Sometimes it's about knowing when to speak up and when to drive forward, even in silence. If this touched you even a little, don't scroll past, hit that subscribe button, follow our channel, and stay with me because what comes next will grip your heart even tighter. This is just the beginning. We began with Elias, the silent driver who steered a life back to safety. But now, let me take you through 5 real moral lessons, each one deeper than the last. These aren't fairy tales. These are the kinds of stories that whisper to you late at night, that stay with you when the world is loud, that ask you, what would you have done? Story 1, The Apple Thief and the Blind Man. In a bustling market in Lahore, a boy, maybe 8 years old, was caught stealing an apple. The vendor shouted, dragged him by the collar, demanded justice. But before the police arrived, an elderly blind man stepped forward and asked, "How much for the apple?" The vendor scoffed. "It's not about money, it's about principle." But the blind man simply paid double the price. Then he turned to the boy and said, "You don't need to steal when there are people ready to help. You just have to ask." That boy? He became the founder of a charity that now feeds over 5,000 children a week in Pakistan. One apple, one blind man, one moment of compassion. Story 2, The Waiter Who Returned $3 million. In Tokyo, a young waiter working the night shift found a forgotten suitcase in a private booth. He opened it looking for identification, only to find it stuffed with money. No name, no ID, no clue. Many would have walked away. He didn't. He reported it, stayed up with the police for hours. 3 days later, a grieving widow came forward. It was her late husband's final savings, meant for a school for disadvantaged children. She had lost all hope, and because of one honest waiter, she was able to build that school. He didn't get a reward, but his name now sits in gold at the school's entrance. Integrity starts with one man. Story 3, The Nurse and the Final Prayer. At a hospital in São Paulo, a nurse named Leticia was finishing her 14-hour shift. She was exhausted, hungry, and emotionally drained. A new patient was wheeled in, an unconscious old man, no ID. "Let him rest," the doctor said. "There's nothing we can do tonight." But something pulled Leticia back into his room. She held his hand and softly whispered, "If you can hear me, I'm here." The man's eyes opened for just a second. He said one word, "Forgiven." Then he passed away. The next morning, police discovered he was a wanted criminal, missing for 34 years. Leticia never knew what he had done, but in that final moment, she gave him the one thing no judge could offer: peace. Story 4, The Boy with the Chalk. In a small village school in Tanzania, a boy named Jacob was caught writing on the wall with chalk. The teacher was furious. The wall had just been painted. When asked what he wrote, Jacob shyly whispered, "I wrote that I want to be a teacher." The teacher paused. That night, she raised money to buy the class a small blackboard and chalks. Today, Jacob is the headmaster of that very school, all because someone didn't punish his dream. Story 5, The Stranger Who Waited. This last story, it's almost too quiet to be real. In New York City, during a winter storm, an old man sat on a park bench for hours. No phone, no coat, just waiting. A woman approached and said, "Are you okay?" He replied, "I'm waiting for my son. I want to say sorry before it's too late." She sat with him. An hour passed, then two. No one came. Eventually, she walked him to a shelter. 3 days later, his son showed up, asking if anyone had seen his father. They were reunited. The old man had survived because one stranger chose to sit with him in the cold. These aren't just stories. They are questions, living, breathing questions. What would you have done? Would you have paid for the apple, stayed with the old man in the snow, whispered forgiveness to a stranger in his final breath? Each of us gets these moments. They rarely announce themselves, but they wait quietly in the cracks of daily life. And when they arrive, they test who we really are. If your heart's racing right now, that's not an accident. That's the weight of truth brushing up against your soul. Stay with me, because in part 3, we bring it all together, and I promise it will leave you breathless. Let me ask you something simple but impossible to ignore. Have you ever stood in front of a mirror, stared into your own eyes, and whispered, "Am I proud of who I am?" Because that's where it all begins and ends. Everything we explored, Elias and the silent steering wheel, the blind man with the apple, the whisper of forgiveness, the honest waiter, the chalk on the wall, they all share one invisible thread: moral courage. Not the courage to fight dragons or climb mountains, but the far rarer kind, the courage to do what's right when no one's watching. And here's the brutal truth: that kind of courage will cost you. Sometimes it will hurt. It will isolate you. You will be mocked, misunderstood, even punished. Because honesty, empathy, and humility, they terrify people living in delusion. But listen closely. If you want to live a life that matters, you must be willing to stand alone even when you're shaking. You must be willing to return the money, to wait in the snow, to whisper peace to a stranger even when the world calls you foolish, because the world doesn't need more winners. It needs more witnesses, people who carry the torch of truth no matter how dim it burns. Let me tell you about the final story that changed me. The letter in the old bookstore. I was in Prague, wandering alone. There was an old bookstore by the river, barely lit, filled with dust and forgotten pages. I picked up a leather-bound journal, no title, just initials. Inside was a handwritten letter. To the person reading this, if you're holding this book, then I'm probably gone. But if there's still time for you, then do one thing. Tell the truth. To yourself. To others, even if your voice trembles. Because I spent my life hiding, and only at the end did I learn the truth doesn't set you free. It makes you whole. Signed R. I never learned who R was, but that letter lives inside me, and now, maybe, it lives inside you too. So here we are. You started this video with curiosity, maybe just scrolling, maybe killing time, but you ended up in a place you didn't expect. A place where your conscience stirs, where your memories knock, and where your future whispers. Now, it's your turn. Because these aren't just 5 moral lessons, they're 5 invitations to change, to listen, to feel again, and to live differently, starting now. If this video reached your heart, don't walk away silently. Click subscribe, join this community, because we're not here just to be entertained. We're here to be transformed. And every week we dive into the deepest truths that make life worth living. What story hit you hardest today? Drop it in the comments. Your voice matters here, because the next story we tell might just be yours. Until then, stay true, stay brave, stay human.